he's got a fixation with some of these legacy outlets, particularly the New York Times, because he considers that his hometown paper still. I would much rather him put his efforts in supporting shows like yours, shows like What Will Be Mine. Why not? I don't, because here's the thing that so many times people say, well, you're just talking to yourself. That's not true. If Trump talks to Dave Rubin, the New York Times will write about it. NBC will cover it. It's just a fact, right? And they will cover this. So why not support the people who are trying to build up this ecosystem of folks on the right and allow them to be successful? So
did you ever give him that kind of advice when he was
I tried once, and I was very clear about a particular, right after the election, he was going down to the New York Times to meet with the editorial board. I was not in favor of that. He let me know in very stark terms that he really didn't care what I thought.
Is it odd to you that these guys can't course correct? I always say it's like the media doesn't have to be great. I would just prefer they not be completely horrible.
But see, the problem is
they seem unable, like the Titanic. They see the iceberg.
I often wondered that myself. I'd say, why don't, like, after the 2016 election, I was in New York City. Obviously, that's where Trump headquarters was. Senior executives from NBC called and said, can we have coffee? Can we talk? So we had this sit down, and they said, we realized we missed a lot of this. So we're going to set up these pop-up bureaus around America. And I'm like, so let me get this straight. You're going to go to like Cedar Rapids for like a week and think that like your New York dude is going to suddenly get in touch with all of these farmers and people who depend on the land. But right, like their idea was like, it was like a field trip.
Yeah.
I mean, and there is a complete, utter misunderstanding of and I think there was no bigger, to me, realization than when Trump did this town hall on CNN the other night.
Mm-hmm.
All of these folks on the left and in the media broke down the next day and apologized. Anderson Cooper went off on this rant. But here's the thing that I said.
You never watch CNN again.
But the thing that I thought was fascinating, Walter Shapiro put out an op-ed that said, we should never do live audiences again. And you're like, because why?
Yeah.
Because you didn't control it. Remember, that audience was handpicked by CNN.
Yeah.
But let me go back to Anderson Cooper. He gets on and does this monologue about how, I'm sorry if you were offended. Now, regardless of whether you like Trump or not, at the end of the day, he is currently the leading candidate for the Republican nomination. And according to ABC Washington Post, he leads Biden by 7. Okay, so that means, let's call it a majority of voters in both the primary and in the general are supportive of Trump. Who are you apologizing to?
Mm-hmm.
If you're supposed to be a down-the-middle media organization, in theory, you should be catering to 50-50. That's what CNN says that they do. So why are you apologizing? Because, 46% were offended or upset? Because they live in a bubble. And I'm convinced that gets to the nut of your question. They don't talk to anyone or see anyone that thinks differently from them. So they finish their afternoon, whatever they do after CNN, and then fly by helicopter to the Hamptons, hang around a bunch of people who think the same way they do, fly back, go to some fundraiser or charity event where everyone talks about the same things that they do. I just don't think that there's an understanding that there's another part of the country other than the one that they live in. And so it's an ignorance that I think is driving this.
You think it might have been a risk to call everybody a bigot and a racist for 10 years because then eventually you realize you can't talk to anybody else and you end up in that exact situation?
So I think for a lot of these folks, when you look at the parties, and Political Playbook has a morning digest of who was spotted at what, it's always the same people at the same events talking to each other. On the left, they never invite anybody on the right. They just, and so the media folks are talking to a bunch of elected Democrats and political operatives on the left. So they all hear the same thing, and they think somehow that's just the prevailing narrative. I think that's the biggest problem right now, is that there is no cross-pollination. I say to people all the time, believe me, I get yelled at by Democrats, by folks on the left, by Trump haters. So I see it, I hear it. I'm very well aware that a lot of people don't like the Republican Party, conservative policies, Donald Trump. But I think for folks on the left, they don't see the other side. They don't think that there is anybody that supports conservative policies, that wants a secure border, that stands up for life. Those things to them are just, they don't get it. They're going, I don't know, who are these people that you speak of?
Right. Well, a guy like me is too out there for them. I mean, I've never been on CNN, ever. I've put out 2 best-selling books. We tried to get on CNN.
But you're a very reasonable person. Like, you've been on the left.
In a way, that's a bigger risk for them.
Right. That's the problem. It's a threat.
Yeah.
Right. So you talk about your evolution in your book. You've talked about the people that you've been around, the outreach. I know on your show you talk a lot about the efforts that you've made to reach out to Democrats to appear.
Yeah.
To them, they don't want you there. They don't want to hear another thing. It's funny. You think about like some of these Sunday shows. They have roundtables. They've never had ABC, CBS, one person that supports Donald Trump. Now, I think to myself, you may not like him, but go back to the statistics. He is the leading candidate, and he is currently either tied, maybe a point or two behind, or in front of Joe Biden. But it's going to be a close race if he's the nominee. And yet, they don't want a single person on their show to give people perspective as to what he's doing or why. Why? Because you don't want people to know.
Let me ask you about the media strategy of your former boss, Trump. So one of my frustrations with him has been that he is feeding the very machine that you're talking about. By going on CNN, he's telling you they're the failing New York Times and failing CNN and they have no ratings. But at the same time, he's empowering that very machine. And to me, that's a real problem in terms of selective pressures. I would rather the machine just die and let's go to the new ground, right? Let's go to the promised land. What do you think about that?
I'm with you on that. I've never been a big fan of him supporting the people who are coming after him.
Maggie Haberman, he keeps doing interviews with her.
And he's got a fixation with some of these legacy outlets, particularly the New York Times, because he considers that his hometown paper still. I would much rather him put his efforts in supporting shows like yours, shows like What Will Be Mine. Why not? I don't, because here's the thing that so many times people say, well, you're just talking to yourself. That's not true. If Trump talks to Dave Rubin, the New York Times will write about it. NBC will cover it. It's just a fact, right? And they will cover this. So why not support the people who are trying to build up this ecosystem of folks on the right and allow them to be successful? So
did you ever give him that kind of advice when he was
I tried once, and I was very clear about a particular, right after the election, he was going down to the New York Times to meet with the editorial board. I was not in favor of that. He let me know in very stark terms that he really didn't care what I thought.
Well, so your feeling was, they're going to lie about you no matter what.
Well, why are you? I also thought, why are we rewarding them this close to after the election? They didn't help us. They hated us, and they're not going to change their position because you go to them. In fact, I thought optically it looked bad. You are the president-elect. They come to you. You don't go to them, number one. Number two, why of all the organizations are they at the top of the list? They should be at the bottom of the list. If you want to do them, have a bunch of conservative folks, media, and have some people that were treated you fairly, and then get to them. But why are we leading with them? But his view was, I can handle anyone. He can, and it's not. I always viewed it as that's not. He handled himself, I think, brilliantly at the CNN town hall. It's not a question of can you handle it, but he gave them 3.1 million viewers that night, the highest. They beat every other station, and so.
Well, I guess he understands that if he does that for them, they'll keep talking about him, and then he'll go back to them. So that's what I'm saying. It becomes this odd self-fulfilling prophecy that they'll both continue. Right. And I think that's sort of a problem at this point.
I agree. And part of the reason that I've never supported him doing that, and I still don't, is because of that exact reason. I think that the more that we give them credence to go after him, he talks to him, no one treats him fairly. I mean, he has sat down for books, interviews, documentaries, you name it, and it always comes out looking poorly on him, no matter what. And so why let that happen? Because if he goes and talks to somebody else, they'll still cover it. So you'll get your thing. You're not going to win them over. It's just not going to happen. And I think that's what, I think somehow he believes if he keeps chipping away, he has this businessman mentality, and I get it, which is I'm going to get a deal with you. You're going to like me. And I think people probably do come away liking him, saying, wow, he's not what I thought. They're not going to go back to their editor and say, I tell you what, it went really well. I'd like to write something nice about the guy. Right. That's not going to happen.
If you're looking for more uncensored opinions from today's thought leaders, check out our media playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a wide variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist, all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.